Let's say you have a garden. Weeds pop up, but only if you keep watering them. Cancer can act in a similar way. Emerging research now suggests that certain lifestyle approaches may help slow tumor growth in some situations, though this is not a replacement for medical care and is still under study. Before you change anything, especially if you take medications, check with your doctor. The surprising part, the most powerful changes aren't expensive or complicated. In fact, it may come down to when you eat, not just what you eat. And that raises a bigger question. Is cancer really just bad luck? Why cancer is not just about bad luck. Many older adults grew up believing that cancer is something you cannot really avoid. They remember family members being diagnosed, neighbors passing away, and news programs describing the disease as though it arrived without warning. For decades, the message sounded straightforward. Your genes determine your risk, and luck decides when the disease will strike. For someone over 65, this belief can feel even stronger. Looking back, you may think, if so many before me faced it, then my chances cannot be much different. This sense makes cancer feel like a shadow you cannot escape, no matter your choices. It often creates resignation, the idea that making any change in diet or activity now would be meaningless. But this belief does not reflect the full picture revealed by decades of careful research. Scientists such as Dr. Thomas Seyfried argue that there is more to cancer than damaged genes alone. The standard view holds that mutations in our DNA trigger uncontrolled cell growth. That explanation forms the basis of most therapies, from radiation to targeted drugs, methods aimed at locating and destroying those mutated cells. This genetic contribution is real, but emerging evidence points to an additional and very important layer: how cells make and use energy. Back in the 1920s, biochemist Otto Warburg observed something striking. Tumor cells prefer to ferment glucose for energy even when oxygen is available, a pathway that normal cells generally avoid. Seyfried and other researchers believe this defect in energy production, the mitochondria no longer functioning as they should, is not just a byproduct, but a central factor in cancer's behavior. In this view, genetic mutations may be better understood as downstream effects of deeper metabolic stress in the cell rather than the sole trigger of disease. This does not mean genes do not matter. Instead, it emphasizes that both genetic changes and metabolic dysfunction play significant roles and may interact in complex ways. What is compelling for seniors to understand is that metabolism is highly influenced by lifestyle, diet, physical activity, and even patterns of eating. Unlike inherited DNA, which cannot be changed, metabolism responds dynamically to current choices. Of course, it is important to be clear about the strength of the evidence. The metabolic view is supported by decades of laboratory research, animal studies, and some early human reports and small clinical efforts. However, large-scale clinical trials are still in progress. For now, the safest way to frame this science is not as a final replacement of the genetic theory, but as a complementary model that broadens how we think about both risk and treatment. For many seniors, this shift in perspective can reduce the feeling of helplessness. If cancer were purely genetic, your future would already be set like a coin toss. By recognizing the metabolic side, you see how your choices, even today, can influence your body's inner environment. This does not mean prevention is guaranteed, but it shows that change is not futile. That realization itself can be empowering. Think of it this way. Cancer cells are less flexible than healthy ones. Normal cells can adapt to a variety of fuels, including fats and ketones, when sugar is limited. Cancer cells, on the other hand, depend heavily on glucose and related factors like insulin. When the bloodstream is consistently rich in sugars from bread, sweets, or sodas, those malignant cells find the conditions they need to grow. But when that internal fuel supply is reduced or altered, cancer cells struggle while healthy cells carry on. This is why daily habits that may seem small, snacking frequently, choosing refined carbohydrates, or relying on sugar for comfort, can have larger consequences over time. They keep delivering fuel to cells that thrive on it. Over the years, those choices create an internal soil where harmful growth has every advantage. Seeing the disease from this angle reframes those same habits. They are no longer harmless indulgences, but part of the environment that cancer requires to expand. The hopeful part is that metabolic processes can shift quickly when you adjust your behavior. Reducing sugar intake, changing meal timing, or introducing more nutrient-dense natural foods can show measurable effects within weeks. Blood glucose levels improve, insulin sensitivity increases, inflammation goes down. For someone over 65, this is an encouraging fact. You do not have to wait decades to benefit. The body can react almost immediately to supportive changes. It is worth noting that none of these lifestyle shifts replace professional medical advice. Cancer remains a serious, complex disease, and standard treatments are essential when it is diagnosed. But considering its metabolic dimension offers an added layer of influence, one that you can begin applying at home under your doctor's guidance. This way of thinking turns lifestyle into part of the defense system, not an afterthought. Understanding cancer as both genetic and metabolic also reshapes how we think about public health. If the disease were only a random strike, prevention would remain limited. But history shows otherwise. Populations that maintain traditional diets, high in natural foods and low in processed sugars, experience strikingly low cancer rates even into old age. Their DNA was not dramatically different from ours. What differed was the internal environment shaped by their lifestyle. For seniors today, the lesson is clear. The body's energy systems are not beyond repair. There is still time to adjust the environment that either nourishes harmful growth or starves it of what it needs. This realization can replace fear with a measure of agency. The influence of luck will never disappear completely, but neither does it hold all the power. And that brings us to the current moment. While these scientific perspectives highlight new possibilities, the reality is that the burden of cancer today is not decreasing. In fact, the latest national reports paint a sobering picture of where seniors stand right now. The shocking 2025 cancer stats everyone should know. If you look closely at the newest reports from 2025, one fact stands out right away. Cancer is still most common in older adults, and the numbers leave little room for doubt. Researchers confirm that the median age at diagnosis in the United States is about 66. That means most new cases cluster around the retirement years, and the majority of cancer deaths also occur in this same age group. Far from being evenly spread across the population, cancer continues to weigh most heavily on seniors. This reality often surprises people who assume that decades of medical progress would have lowered cancer rates in those later years. Advances in detection and treatment have helped people live longer with a diagnosis than ever before, but the sharp concentration among older adults remains. Aging itself increases vulnerability, yet that does not remove the influence of lifestyle choices. The 2025 statistics remind us that understanding both biology and behavior is essential, because this isn't just about fate or the calendar, it's about the conditions cancer needs in order to thrive. Take lung cancer, for example. Despite falling smoking rates, it continues to be the leading cause of cancer death in seniors. Nearly 7 in 10 cases are diagnosed in adults over 65, underscoring how decades of exposure continue to leave a mark. Even with public health victories in reducing cigarette use, cumulative damage from smoking, secondhand smoke, and environmental toxins keeps lung cancer high on the list. The lesson here is that time magnifies the effects of daily exposures. Colorectal cancer shows a similar pattern. More than half of new diagnoses appear after the age of 65, and it is now one of the top 3 cancers among seniors. Screenings have caught many cases earlier, saving lives, but incidence remains concentrated in older groups. Lifestyle clearly plays a large role. Populations that favor refined carbohydrates and processed meats see higher rates, while those that maintain high-fiber, plant-rich diets tend to fare better. In fact, recent studies show that metabolic risks, such as elevated fasting glucose and excess weight, contribute substantially to colorectal cancer burden worldwide, and these risks continue to rise in many regions. For seniors, that means focusing on metabolic health may be just as important as getting screened. Prostate cancer is another clear example of age concentration. Almost 60% of diagnoses occur in men over 65, making it one of the most common cancers in older men. While many prostate tumors grow slowly, the advanced cases tell a different story. When prostate cancer becomes aggressive, later-stage disease makes a major contribution to cancer mortality. The perception that it is always harmless does not hold when you look closely at the outcomes for older men whose disease progresses. Breast cancer also affects older women more than public perception suggests. Because awareness campaigns often focus on younger and middle-aged groups, many forget that risk rises steadily with age. By the time a woman reaches 70, the likelihood of facing breast cancer is much higher than it was just 2 or 3 decades earlier. Detection and treatment now save countless lives compared to the past, but incidence among seniors remains substantial. The influence of genetics cannot be ignored, but weight, diet, and activity patterns continue to shape outcomes in this group. Pancreatic cancer demonstrates another dimension of the story. While less common than lung, colorectal, prostate, or breast cancers, it remains one of the deadliest, with most diagnoses occurring past age 65. Its biology makes early detection difficult, which only raises the importance of prevention. Risk factors such as obesity, long-term inflammation, and high sugar intake appear often in patient histories. These are not distant, abstract links. They are everyday factors that accumulate across a lifetime. When you put these cancers together, the overall picture becomes clearer. The bulk of diagnoses and deaths are not scattered evenly across all ages, but are concentrated in older adults, with median diagnosis still anchored around 66. The implication is straightforward. While age remains the strongest predictor, metabolic and lifestyle patterns amplify the risks. Researchers consistently observe how elevated blood sugar, excess body weight, and chronic inflammation push the odds higher for the cancers most common among seniors. The takeaway is not that progress has halted because treatments today do extend life and improve survival, but that the front line of prevention still lies in everyday choices. If incidence is already concentrated in older adults and metabolic dysfunction drives much of the risk, then shifting lifestyle at 65, 70, or beyond still changes the equation. Energy metabolism is not a fixed trait. It responds directly to food, movement, and body weight. That adaptability offers seniors a chance to influence their internal environment, even late in life. For many watching these numbers, the temptation is to read them as proof of inevitability. What matters more is what the statistics also show. The clearest points of leverage sit right where risk is highest. The cancers that dominate senior diagnoses are the very ones most linked to diet, glucose, weight, and metabolism. That connection is both sobering and empowering at once. It confirms the seriousness of age-related cancer risk, but also reveals the specific places where change makes a real difference. And so the question naturally arises, if metabolism matters this much, what fuels are these cancer cells actually relying on so heavily? There is one common nutrient that stands out, and it is something most of us consume daily without thinking twice. The fuel cancer cells can't resist. What sits at the center of cancer's appetite is not a mystery. Tumor cells show a unique dependency on one primary fuel that most people ingest many times each day: sugar. For decades, This link has been examined in labs and clinics alike. While glucose feeds cancer growth, major cancer centers such as MD Anderson emphasize an important detail. Eating sugar on its own has not been proven to directly cause cancer. Instead, the concern is that frequent spikes in blood glucose and insulin, often driven by excess refined carbohydrates, fuel an environment where tumors can thrive. The metabolic effects of obesity, chronic high insulin, and long-term inflammation are considered the real connections. Understanding why sugar holds this power requires a closer look at basic biology. In healthy cells, mitochondria act like small engines, converting available fuel into usable energy with flexibility and efficiency. They can shift smoothly among glucose, fat, and ketones, much like a hybrid car that adjusts between gas and electricity. Tumor cells, however, lose this adaptability. Their mitochondria are damaged or inefficient, leaving them to rely on fermentation as their primary mode of energy production. Fermentation depends heavily on glucose. This is what Otto Warburg first observed a century ago, and it remains one of the most consistent features seen in cancer cell metabolism today. The difference is striking enough to imagine in daily life. A child fueled by candy charges through the room with boundless energy, but quickly crashes afterward. In a different way, tumor cells light up when glucose is abundant. They accelerate growth, divide faster, and invade surrounding tissue. The consequence in this case is not playful chaos, but dangerous expansion that overwhelms healthy systems. Cancer's dependence on glucose is therefore less an indulgence than a requirement for survival in its compromised state. Researchers, led by Dr. Thomas Seyfried and others, have pointed to this weakness as an opportunity. If cancer needs more glucose than healthy cells, then moderating how much of it circulates in the bloodstream becomes a practical way to restrict tumor growth. By reducing frequent glucose spikes, seniors can selectively weaken malignant cells while normal tissues adapt to other fuels. This is where the gardening analogy from earlier returns. When you stop overwatering weeds, the flowers still flourish. Here, healthy cells switch gracefully to fats and ketones, while tumors struggle to keep going. Importantly, the benefit does not depend on eliminating sugar completely. Even gradual reductions in refined carbohydrates can lower average blood glucose levels over the course of the day. What matters most is avoiding the constant bath of sugar that makes up many modern eating patterns. Seniors are especially vulnerable because everyday foods that seem harmless, morning cereals, packaged breads, store-bought sauces, and juices, are often loaded with added sugars. These products create a near-continuous trickle of glucose that keeps tumors supplied. Adjusting the diet to reduce or eliminate these steady feeds improves the inner environment in measurable ways. A useful picture comes from considering two refrigerators side by side. In one home, shelves overflow with sodas, pastries, and processed snacks, always within reach. In another, the kitchen is packed with fresh produce, proteins, and healthy fats. The first home makes sugar intake effortless and constant. The second makes it scarce. Tumor cells operate much like residents in those homes. When every shelf is filled with quick sugars, the disease has what it needs to grow. When storage is arranged differently, cancer cells are left without their preferred resource. Scientific studies support this distinction. Blood tests after sugary meals show surges in glucose and insulin. Under microscopes, tumor cells use these surges to accelerate growth. When glucose is restricted, their growth rate slows, and in some settings, tumors shrink. At the same time, healthy cells prove resilient. During lower glucose availability, the liver produces ketones, which supply the brain and muscles with stable energy. Seniors can take comfort in knowing their normal tissues adapt easily to these fuels, while malignant cells face a challenge they cannot fully overcome. This is not speculation alone. Even recent research into other forms of sugar highlights the pattern. For example, a laboratory and animal study summarized by the National Cancer Institute showed that dietary fructose can be converted in the liver into lipids that certain tumors may then use for growth. While this observation remains preliminary, and its impact in humans is still under study, it reinforces the broader point. Frequent intake of added sugars creates conditions tumors can exploit in more ways than one. Looking backwards through history demonstrates a similar story. Communities where access to refined sugars and processed carbohydrates was historically limited reported strikingly low cancer rates. Their traditional diets, high in natural foods and stable in blood sugar effects, left little excess energy circulating for tumors. With modernization came refined flours, soft drinks, and packaged snacks, and along with them, a surge in cancer diagnoses. Although correlation does not prove causation, the pattern is too consistent to dismiss, especially when it aligns with the biological evidence. Everyday life illustrates the same principle. A slice of festive cake, once or twice a year, is unlikely to matter. But drinking sweetened coffee each morning, relying on white bread at lunch, having biscuits in the afternoon, and ending the evening with a soda means glucose is available to your cells and to any lurking tumor hour after hour. Routine, not celebration, is what fuels disease. Seniors who trim these steady supplies disrupt the chain and create a more hostile environment for cancer. Still, an important caution remains. No dietary change alone is enough to treat cancer. Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and newer targeted therapies remain essential once cancer develops. But parallel to those medical interventions, adjusting diet and metabolism builds an additional line of defense. Reducing excess sugar is an actionable, inexpensive, and low-risk way to influence a biological weakness in cancer cells. It shifts the everyday environment away from what tumors want most and strengthens the advantage of healthy tissue. In practical terms, this perspective reframes food choices. Instead of thinking of sugar purely in terms of weight or diabetes risk, seniors can recognize its link to cancer metabolism. Awareness sharpens when you realize that something as small as your breakfast decision changes the battlefield inside you. Cutting unnecessary sugars removes a key fuel many tumors rely on, while leaving your body capable of carrying on with alternatives. It is a reminder that not every influence on cancer is outside your control. So the lesson is not that sugar alone controls cancer's fate, but that the habits shaping your metabolism matter profoundly to how illness develops or slows. Seen in this way, every small step in reducing refined carbohydrates is less about denial and more about protection. That shift in outlook helps replace fear with agency. Knowing the fuel many malignant cells depend on makes diet one of the clearest levers available for prevention and support. And this realization brings up an often overlooked question, especially for seniors who may assume lifestyle strategies are meant for younger people. If tumors display such a critical dependence, are older adults really equipped to make these shifts in metabolism? The answer might be more surprising and more encouraging than many expect. Why seniors have a unique advantage in metabolic therapy. Many older adults first hear the phrase metabolic therapy and assume it is aimed at the young, the highly motivated, or those with more energy to take on challenging health regimens. It is easy to believe that advancing age means fewer options for change. But in reality, seniors carry several natural advantages that make strategies like intermittent fasting and carbohydrate reduction not only practical, but often smoother than for younger groups. Rather than being on the losing side of biology, older adults are more aligned with the rhythms that metabolic therapy requires. One of the most significant factors is appetite. Younger people often eat large portions and snack late into the night, making fasting windows difficult to maintain. By contrast, many seniors notice their appetite lessens with age. Smaller meals are satisfying, cravings come less frequently, and long breaks between eating happen without conscious effort. That natural spacing resembles intermittent fasting, which functions best when the body has periods without constant glucose intake. What feels like a simple change in appetite actually sets up a strong foundation for the therapy. This advantage extends to daily lifestyle. Retirement or reduced workloads lead to a steadier rhythm of living. Unlike the busy schedules that push younger workers toward convenience foods and erratic meal times, seniors have control over their kitchen and their timing. They can choose to prepare meals with whole foods, take breaks between eating, and align schedules around their needs rather than rushing from one obligation to another. That slower pace translates into stable eating patterns that directly support glucose control and reduced cancer fuel. Medication routines also play an unexpected role in building consistency. Many seniors already structure mornings and evenings around taking pills for blood pressure, cholesterol, or other conditions. Those set times naturally encourage a stable framework. Layering meal schedules on top of that pattern feels less disruptive because health-oriented structure is already in place. Younger adults often lack that stability and struggle to stick to consistent windows. Seniors, accustomed to managing health each day, often integrate fasting and meal timing more comfortably. Carbohydrate reduction is another cornerstone of metabolic therapy, and here too older adults often make changes with less resistance. Energy-dense processed foods, pancakes, sodas, or sugary snacks can be more difficult to tolerate as the digestive system ages. Bloating, reflux, and afternoon grogginess after refined carbs naturally nudge seniors toward lighter foods. Substituting vegetables, proteins, and healthy fats not only lowers discomfort, but also supports metabolic health by depriving cancer cells of excess glucose. While younger groups may eat sugar out of habit or social pressure, seniors often feel motivated by comfort and stability to limit it. Social habits also make things easier. At younger ages, friends and coworkers tend to bond over high-calorie gatherings, late-night orders, or parties centered on processed foods and alcohol. Seniors often find social activity shifting toward lighter lunches, earlier dinners, or shared potlucks built around simpler dishes. That change lowers peer pressure and makes it easier to maintain a routine that stabilizes glucose. Instead of standing out for dieting, older adults usually discover that their peers prefer similar choices. Regular medical monitoring offers another benefit. Seniors often receive routine checkups, blood tests, and medication reviews. This allows them to watch how glucose, blood pressure, and cholesterol respond to lifestyle changes in real time. Seeing numbers improve creates motivation that is harder to achieve when you are younger and medical testing is rare. A tangible connection between choices and measurable health outcomes reinforces progress and encourages consistency. Together, these factors build a framework where metabolic therapy not only fits into senior life, but flourishes in it. Reduced appetite, steadier days, structured routines, and greater health awareness each reduce the barriers that frustrate younger adults. At the same time, seniors possess stronger reasons for engagement. The experience of illness among friends or family, or personal encounters with conditions like diabetes or heart disease, highlights the cost of neglect. With higher risk comes greater urgency, and that urgency sharpens commitment to meaningful change. It is important, however, to insert a clear note of caution. While seniors hold many natural advantages, they also face specific medical considerations. Reputable institutions like the Mayo Clinic and Harvard Medical School emphasize that intermittent fasting or carbohydrate restriction should be approached carefully in older populations. If you live with diabetes, use insulin or take other glucose-lowering drugs. Do not begin fasting without medical guidance. Timing and medication doses may require adjustment to avoid dangerous blood sugar drops. The same applies to those with blood pressure or heart medications, where changes in diet can interact with how drugs work. The safe path is always under medical supervision, with careful monitoring. That point bears repeating in very practical terms. If you are on glucose-lowering drugs, do not start a fasting plan without your clinician. Blood sugar can fall too low, and medication timing may need to be tailored to your new routine. Seniors, more than any other group, must treat metabolic therapy as something to coordinate with professional care. When viewed alongside these cautions, what stands out is not the effort required but the tools seniors already hold. Intermittent fasting does not mean starving. It means taking advantage of appetite patterns that are already present. Carbohydrate reduction is not about extreme diets. It is about listening to the body's discomfort with heavy sugar and refining meals toward balance. Structured days, medication routines, early dinners, and lighter social events. These are not obstacles, they are assets waiting to be used. Skeptics may argue that reduced energy or pre-existing conditions complicate everything. In truth, metabolic therapy does not demand athletic strength. It asks for consistency, modest restraint, and predictable eating patterns. These adaptations align with what many seniors already practice without labeling it as therapy, far from being in the wrong position. This age group is uniquely poised to shape metabolism in a way that weakens cancer's preferred environment. The conclusion is straightforward. Seniors are not disqualified from metabolic strategies by their age. They are positioned to succeed because of it. The very attributes that seem like drawbacks, lighter appetite, slower pace, structured routines, become the foundation of one of the most promising complementary approaches to reducing cancer's fuel. Even more, they highlight that aging does not have to mean surrender. It can mean recognizing how biology changes and applying those changes with intention. This understanding naturally opens the door to a critical detail that is often missed in everyday discussions of diet. People spend great energy debating superfoods and nutrient lists, but what seniors should know is that when you eat may carry as much weight as what you eat. The daily rhythm itself, not just the menu, can change the body's inner environment in ways that matter deeply for cancer risk. The power of timing over what's on your plate. People often worry most about whether each meal is packed with the right superfoods. The lists are everywhere: dark berries, leafy greens, chia seeds, goji powders. These items get marketed like protective charms. Yet medical research suggests a different priority. The rhythm of when you eat may play an equal or greater role than which vegetable sits on your plate. Food timing acts like a switch, influencing hormones and metabolism in ways that either encourage orderly repair in cells or supply the very fuel that tumors exploit. Intermittent fasting, at its foundation, is straightforward. It means leaving regular gaps between meals rather than grazing all day. During those hours without food, insulin declines, and the body transitions away from constant glucose burning. Fat stores supply energy, and the liver produces ketones as an alternative fuel. Healthy tissues adapt with little trouble, often functioning more efficiently under this shift. Cancer cells, however, lack that flexibility. They depend heavily on glucose fermentation. When the flow of sugar is interrupted, they falter. Many hear fasting and picture discomfort. In reality, it can be as simple as extending the overnight pause. If you finish dinner at 6 o'clock and wait until mid-morning for breakfast, you have already completed a 14 to 16-hour fast. Much of it happens while you sleep. The result is not exhaustion, but measurable metabolic benefits: steadier insulin response, reduced inflammation markers, and a cellular environment programmed for maintenance instead of unchecked growth. Scientists note this difference matters because normal tissues make the most progress during repair phases, while tumors prefer constant stimulation. It helps to visualize fasting as household upkeep. When dishes pile up without pause, disorder grows. But letting the sink stay empty for long stretches makes deeper cleaning possible. Cells work the same way. Frequent eating, keeps them busy managing incoming fuel. Fasting windows tell them to focus on renewing, recycling, and strengthening. Small damaged parts get replaced rather than ignored, which narrows the opportunities cancer looks for in destabilized systems. A similar picture comes from gardening. Attempting to plant fresh crops before clearing old weeds leaves poor soil behind. Taking time to reset the soil first, even briefly, improves what grows later. Intermittent fasting creates this reset inside the body. Instead of always layering food on top of food, long breaks give time for balance. Glucose levels fall, insulin draws back, and the biological soil grows less friendly to tumor metabolism. The science points to insulin as a key messenger. Drops in insulin during fasting shift cells from building mode into repairing mode. This is the posture best suited for limiting uncontrolled cell division. At the same time, ketone production begins. These energy molecules supply the brain and muscles with steady fuel, while tumors struggle to use them effectively. Older adults often notice improved mental clarity and steadier energy once this fuel switch stabilizes. The change can feel less like a strain and more like the body has finally settled into a sustainable rhythm. There is no requirement for extremes. Even a 12-hour overnight pause shows subtle benefits. 14 to 16 hours produce greater results. And some choose occasional longer stretches once they are comfortable. For seniors, the easiest path often begins by eating an earlier dinner and skipping late snacks. That single step extends the natural overnight fast without any new rules to memorize. The effect builds over weeks, not days, but consistency matters more than intensity. For older adults, meal timing often matches existing habits. Many prefer lighter dinners or no appetite late at night. Instead of disregarding that natural pattern, metabolic therapy uses it deliberately. What looks like an ordinary adjustment, ending the kitchen hours earlier, aligns directly with cellular benefits. Younger groups often force strict fasting into busy, irregular schedules, but seniors can align it smoothly with daily rhythms already in place. An overlooked aspect of meal timing is how it shapes blood sugar stability. Frequent eating creates repeated peaks of glucose, followed by insulin surges. Over the years, that cycle blunts sensitivity and builds a pathway cancer can exploit. Narrowing eating into fewer hours shortens those peaks. Glucose rises when food is eaten, then drops back to baseline, leaving longer intervals of low sugar that are hostile to tumor metabolism. Consider how we maintain machines. A car driven constantly without routine service eventually breaks down. Planned maintenance extends its life. The body has similar requirements. Pausing intake signals essential cleanup routines. Much like scheduled service keeps a vehicle running. Cancer develops best in neglect, not in a well-maintained system. Some worry fasting could sap strength, but evidence indicates healthy cells enter a protective, efficient state. They adjust by slowing unnecessary growth and relying on fat reserves for energy. Cancer cells, built for sprinting on sugar, cannot adapt to this steady pace. This difference creates selective pressure in favor of normal tissue health. A concept occasionally discussed is the glucose-ketone index, developed by researchers as a way to roughly track the balance between sugar and ketone levels in the blood. Some case reports have used this measure to guide therapy. However, it is an experimental tool, not a standardized medical practice. If any senior considers using monitoring like this, it should only happen in consultation with their doctor. Professional oversight ensures safety and prevents misinterpretation. The broader point is that shifting from constant grazing to measured eating schedules changes cancer's fuel equation. For many, that means simply respecting natural hunger cues rather than forcing unnecessary snacks. Seniors, in particular, are well positioned to use timing as a tool since lighter appetites and earlier meals already support these patterns. It is essential to note, however, that fasting is not free of cautions. Mayo Clinic and Harvard experts point out that while many short-term studies show improvements in weight, glucose, inflammation, and even quality of life markers, the long-term effects in older adults remain under investigation. For anyone managing diabetes, heart disease, or medication regimens, fasting should always be supervised medically. Adjustments to drug timing may be required, and blood sugar monitoring is crucial to avoid drops. Treating fasting like a prescription with clear oversight is the safest approach. When applied thoughtfully, intermittent fasting with moderate carbohydrate reduction becomes a practical form of metabolic therapy. It is not fringe advice, but a reflection of how cells respond to predictable cycles of rest and repair. Seniors have the chance to leverage this, not through expensive supplements or long lists of exotic foods, but by using time itself as a resource. But even the best timing strategy can still be undermined if meals, once eaten, are filled with ingredients that quietly replenish cancer's favorite fuel. Many so-called everyday foods create steady glucose spikes without looking dangerous on the surface. Recognizing where that hidden sugar is hiding becomes the next step in maintaining an internal environment that does not give cancer an advantage. How everyday foods become hidden risks. It is easy to overlook how common foods can quietly shape cancer risk. Many of the greatest dangers do not come from desserts or obvious indulgences, but from everyday items that seem ordinary, even healthy. These foods often break down quickly into glucose or contain hidden sugars that build a steady background supply, exactly the environment cancer cells prefer. Bread is one of the clearest examples. Whether white, wheat, or multigrain, its starches transform into glucose during digestion nearly as fast as refined sugar itself. What feels like a modest slice of toast or a sandwich delivers a substantial sugar load once inside the body. Seniors who rely on bread for breakfast, lunch, and dinner rarely think they are overindulging, but their bloodstream tells a different story. Each meal extends the glucose stream that cancer cells depend on to continue fermenting for energy. Breakfast cereals further complicate matters. Brightly labeled packages promoting whole grains or heart health often contain more sugar per serving than desserts. A bowl can reach 20 grams or higher, spiking blood sugar and prompting large insulin responses. Even granola, marketed as a wholesome choice, is frequently coated with syrups or mixed with sweetened dried fruit, creating a hidden sugar bomb. For seniors who began each morning with cereal for decades, this light breakfast may quietly fuel the very conditions they want to avoid. Pasta sauces illustrate how hidden sugars creep in under different names. A simple glance at supermarket jars reveals ingredients like glucose syrup, high fructose corn syrup, or evaporated cane juice. No matter the label, the body converts them into glucose all the same. A generous serving of spaghetti with sauce may appear far from dessert, yet metabolically it can carry many of the same effects. Chronic use of packaged sauces turns what should be a hearty meal into another steady glucose stream. Snack foods add more confusion. Crackers, cereal bars, or energy snacks often package starch and sugar together while advertising protein or fiber. These convenient items sit innocently on shelves in the health aisle, making them appear safe. In the bloodstream, however, they act no differently than candy bars. For tumor cells, sugar packaged as a snack bar or as cookies from a bakery supplies the same fermentable fuel. Marketing language does not soften the biological effect. Drinks deserve particular caution. While soda is well known for its sugar content, juices, smoothies, and flavored waters often rival it. Orange juice, for instance, can contain 30 grams of sugar per small glass. Smoothies combining fruit, flavored yogurt, and sweet additions may exceed 50 grams in one blend. Once digested, the difference between soda and juice appears negligible. Both deliver glucose surges that cancer cells use for growth. Even seniors trying to make health-conscious swaps may unintentionally maintain a steady supply line. Condiments commonly double or triple sugar intake without drawing attention. Ketchup, salad dressings, and marinades often add teaspoons of sugar to meals that otherwise appear balanced. A bowl of vegetables or a fresh salad loses much of its metabolic value under a coating of sweetened dressing. Day after day, these small additions prevent glucose and insulin levels from truly settling. Research institutions caution against interpreting this as sugar directly causes cancer. MD Anderson and other centers explain it more carefully. Added sugars do not create cancer by themselves, but consistent excess contributes to obesity, inflammation, and insulin resistance, all proven drivers of higher cancer risk. The American Heart Association offers clear limits as guidance: about 25 grams of added sugar per day for women and 36 grams for men. Most seniors exceed these amounts without realizing it, simply because sugars are hidden in familiar products like bread, sauces, and cereals. One processed ingredient has attracted special attention: high fructose corn syrup. Studies summarized by the National Cancer Institute suggest fructose is processed in the liver and converted into lipids that some tumors may use for energy. This pathway is still under investigation, but it illustrates one reason highly processed sweeteners can be especially concerning. Cancer's metabolism is complex, and research is uncovering new ways that added sugars provide indirect support for tumor growth beyond glucose alone. Seniors looking to reduce risk can use a simple, practical tool: scan ingredient labels for added sugars that appear under many names. Sucrose, fructose, dextrose, maltose, and high fructose corn syrup are all common disguises. Recognizing these terms makes it easier to spot hidden sugar in foods that otherwise seem benign. By becoming label detectives, seniors avoid being misled by marketing claims of healthfulness and instead focus on actual content. The reason these everyday sources matter more than occasional indulgences is frequency. A slice of cake at a family birthday does not create the same environment as daily breakfast cereals, routine pasta dinners, or constant bread at every meal. Cancer thrives under persistent fuel supply, not rare treats. What feels modest in isolation becomes threatening when repeated 3 times a day, every day. This steady rhythm of glucose undermines even careful attempts to eat healthy. The encouraging reality is that awareness alone unlocks options. Reducing hidden sugars does not demand extreme dieting. Swapping bread with vegetables, preparing pasta sauce without added sugar, choosing savory condiments, or skipping processed snack bars leads to meaningful change. Each small substitution bends the metabolic landscape in favor of healthy cells rather than cancer's demands. Practical adjustments also improve meal enjoyment. Many seniors report that lowering sugar allows natural flavors of herbs, vegetables, proteins, and healthy fats to stand out more clearly. After several weeks, the palate recalibrates. Once sweet foods begin to taste cloying, while simpler ingredients feel satisfying. Instead of craving cereal mixes or flavored yogurt, individuals gravitate toward eggs, nuts, or fresh produce. These choices sustain energy, lower cravings, and keep glucose steady, conditions that cancer cells find inhospitable. Awareness shifts the balance of power. Rather than feeling trapped by statistics, seniors gain specific, tangible steps that directly influence their inner environment. The changes do not require luxury foods or complex superfood lists, only a clear-eyed view of labels and routines. That change of perspective transforms daily meals from potential risks into tools of prevention and resilience. The guidance is consistent. Avoid excessive added sugars, follow practical consumer limits, and beware of foods marketed as healthy but loaded with sweeteners. Even modest alignment with these principles alters risk factors over time. This is not about deprivation, but about choosing conditions where healthy tissue remains flexible and tumors find little support. And while food choices shape the metabolic soil, they are only part of the equation. Another powerful factor operates alongside diet, one that improves insulin sensitivity, enhances mitochondrial health, and directly lowers the same risks fueled by hidden sugars. Seniors often wonder whether it makes any difference to take it up later in life. Yet the science gives a surprisingly clear answer. Exercise, the anti-cancer medicine you don't need a prescription for. Exercise stands out as one of the most accessible ways to influence metabolism and strengthen defenses against cancer. And it does so without needing prescriptions or expensive treatments. For many older adults, activity carries more importance than it first appears. It is not about athletic performance or chasing fitness milestones from decades past. It is about directly influencing the same biological processes that cancer cells depend on, turning movement into a daily medicine with measurable effects. When people hear exercise, the mind often shifts to treadmills or gyms. But for seniors, exercise works on a much deeper level. Two areas connected firmly to cancer prevention, blood sugar control, and mitochondrial health. Glucose is the fuel many tumors thrive on, and muscles provide one of the strongest ways to clear it from circulation. When you walk, stretch, or do housework, those working muscles act like sponges, absorbing glucose and lowering the concentration available in the bloodstream. That means less fuel for malignant cells to exploit. At the same time, the effort of movement encourages mitochondria, the small power units inside cells, to multiply and become more efficient. Research consistently shows that exercise improves insulin sensitivity and enhances mitochondrial function. These changes make healthy cells more resilient and energy efficient, while leaving cancer's defective metabolism at a disadvantage. What matters most for older adults is that activity does not need to be extreme to trigger these benefits. Intense workouts are not required. Small, steady practices provide significant returns. A short walk after a meal quickly lowers post-meal blood sugar, stopping the prolonged spikes that fuel cancer. Gardening blends stretching, squatting, and lifting into functional exercise that happens almost naturally. Dancing counts too. Half an hour of moving at home or alongside others stimulates glucose control and brings joy simultaneously. Each of these approachable activities supports the same fundamental processes that limit cancer's growth conditions. The benefit becomes especially clear when combined with dietary changes. Eating fewer refined carbohydrates already reduces the glucose supply. Pairing that with activity compounds the effect, since muscles actively draw sugar out of the bloodstream just when levels start to rise. A short stroll after lunch or dinner, for example, dampens glucose peaks that otherwise linger for hours. In this way, exercise works as an immediate companion to metabolic strategies like sugar reduction or intermittent fasting. The body shifts faster, excess sugar burns sooner, and cancer cells confront an internal environment with fewer resources. Some might dismiss light activity as too small to matter, yet the real advantage comes from repetition. Day after day, even modest sessions accumulate. Over time, insulin sensitivity rises, inflammation falls, and weight shifts toward leaner balance. Swiss Re-backed reviews and trials show that people who practiced consistent movement, even without athletic training, experienced measurable improvements in metabolism, glucose management, and mitochondrial function. For seniors, this means noticeable protection is available without demanding physical extremes. Concrete guidance helps make this real. A safe starting point for many older adults is adding a 10 to 20 minute walk after meals each day, along with 2 short sessions of light resistance work per week. Chair stands, lifting light weights, or using resistance bands can strengthen major muscles without strain. These steps, combined with ordinary daily activity, form a manageable prescription. Consistency outweighs intensity. And before starting, especially if you live with chronic conditions, a doctor's clearance is smart. If you have cardiovascular or mobility concerns, it is especially important to favor low-impact activities and adapt them to your abilities. Another advantage of exercise is the way it integrates with life without feeling like treatment. Many seniors already have activities that qualify as real exercise without wearing a fitness label. Planting flowers involves squatting, lifting, and balance. Carrying groceries requires strength. Sweeping or raking engages the shoulders and arms. When approached as purposeful movement, these tasks stop being chores and begin serving as part of a protective routine. Even seemingly minor changes, taking stairs, walking through the park, or choosing to stand more often, add layers of benefit. Exercise also strengthens emotional and social health. Walking with a friend, attending group dance classes, or joining a community garden blends companionship with physical effort. These connections help sustain habits, lower feelings of isolation, and reduce stress hormones that interfere with metabolic balance. Chronic stress raises cortisol and disrupts insulin. Control conditions tumors favor. Engaging in group exercise quietly tackles both metabolism and mental health, stacking benefits where medication alone cannot. Safety remains a central point. Seniors should aim for sustainable activity rather than punishing workouts. Supportive footwear, gradual intensity, and exercises that respect joint health protect against injury. Balance-focused practices such as Tai Chi, stretching, or light yoga limit fall risk while strengthening stability. These measures keep activity consistent across weeks and months, the very consistency that provides defense against cancer's metabolic needs. For many, an unexpected outcome appears after starting. Instead of draining energy, regular movement often creates more of it. Improved circulation means tissues receive oxygen more efficiently. Muscles strengthen, making daily activities easier. Hunger stabilizes, and sleep often improves. Quality rest and steady energy then reinforce further activity, creating a cycle of strength and protection. None of these gains require athletic talent. They begin with showing up regularly for light, repeatable movement. The role of exercise can be reframed in practical terms. It operates like medicine. It lowers glucose, strengthens mitochondria, reduces inflammation, supports immune defenses, and stabilizes body weight. Unlike prescribed drugs, its side effects are overwhelmingly positive, and it integrates naturally into life. Walking after meals, gardening in the yard, or using light resistance bands provide a form of therapy with documented results. The cost is negligible, the risks minimal, and the returns tangible. The persistent myth that seniors cannot benefit from activity gives an illusion of inevitability. In reality, the opposite is true. Age is not a barrier, but an opportunity for meaningful outcomes. Muscles remain capable of adaptation well into the 7th, 8th, and 9th decades of life. Cells continue to respond to stress signals from movement by renewing mitochondria and sharpening energy use. By committing to small, repeated exercise routines, seniors exert clear influence over the very pathways that cancer exploits most. Approaching movement in this way transforms the question from "does it matter at this age?" to recognizing it as one of the most effective levers still available. While medications and treatments remain necessary tools, exercise adds something they cannot replicate: the daily training of metabolism toward efficiency. And each session, however small, adds to a line of defense that strengthens steadily over time. This perspective sheds light on a larger issue many older adults wrestle with: the belief that age itself seals the outcome. Exercise demonstrates that active choices remain influential despite advancing years. The body still responds, adapts, and benefits. This becomes the groundwork for rethinking another widespread assumption about cancer in later life, one that continues to discourage hope even when the evidence suggests otherwise. Myth: cancer is inevitable with old age. Among the most persistent assumptions older adults carry is the belief that cancer arrives automatically with age. People often compare it to wrinkles or gray hair as if it were simply another milestone of getting older. Surveys confirm that many seniors accept this as fact, convinced the disease is inevitable after a certain point. That conclusion builds gradually. Friends in their 60s announce diagnoses. Relatives in their 70s pass from the disease. Doctors repeat the phrase that age is the greatest risk factor. Newspapers publish rising statistics each decade. All these signals blur together until risk is mistaken for destiny. Yet that distinction is crucial. Age raises the odds, but it does not lock in a future of cancer. Reliable data show this clearly. According to the National Cancer Institute, the median age for a cancer diagnosis in the United States is about 66. In other words, half of all cases occur before this point and half after. The figure confirms that cancer is most common among older populations, yet it also shows that many seniors move through those years without ever receiving a diagnosis. Cancer is widespread, but not a universal outcome of aging. If it truly were unavoidable, virtually every person living into their 70s, 80s, or 90s would face it. Many do not. That gap between risk and certainty is exactly where lifestyle and environment exert influence. Understanding why aging increases risk but does not guarantee disease requires looking at how the body transforms across time. Cells divide billions of times during a lifetime, and each division brings a chance for error. Over decades, inflammation rises more easily, mitochondria grow less efficient, and DNA repair mechanisms slow. These are real changes that make it easier for cancer to arise. But whether those latent risks actually materialize depends on daily living. Conditions, patterns of eating, movement, exposure to toxins, and recovery periods such as fasting play a decisive role in shaping the interior environment. Age creates vulnerabilities. Habits determine whether those vulnerabilities become opportunities for tumors. Examples from different parts of the world illustrate this point in a way statistics alone cannot. Some Mediterranean regions have long reported many people living well into their 80s or 90s with comparatively lower cancer rates. Their routines include meals rich in vegetables, legumes, fish, and olive oil, eaten in smaller portions with long breaks between. Physical activity is incorporated into daily life, walking hills, tending gardens, performing chores without machines. Historically, these behaviors kept blood sugar steadier and mitochondria more flexible. Cancer diagnoses still occur, but at a lower frequency than in industrialized nations of similar life expectancy. Similar observations come from Okinawa. Older studies describing centenarians there note that cancer outcomes were historically more favorable than in Western countries. Traditional meals centered on vegetables, tubers, soy, and modest amounts of protein. Meals were smaller, and many people followed a principle of stopping eating before feeling completely full, keeping lifelong calorie intake slightly reduced without malnutrition. That pattern naturally limited surges of blood glucose. Aging happened, as it does everywhere, but the internal conditions remained less favorable to tumor growth. It is important to treat these observations with caution. Modern research warns that these population studies cannot be interpreted as direct proof that diet alone prevented cancer. Historical records are incomplete, medical systems varied, and other factors such as genetics or infection rates may have influenced outcomes. What researchers do agree on, however, is that as traditional communities adopt industrial diets loaded with sugar, refined flours, and processed foods, cancer rates rise alongside them. This correlation does not prove a single cause, but it strongly suggests that environment matters as much as age. So the story from these populations acts as evidence by contrast. If aging itself dictated inevitability, then Mediterranean and Okinawan elders would mirror modern cancer rates despite their different diets. But they did not, and as their meals and lifestyles have become more westernized, cancer incidence also climbs. This parallel indicates lifestyle is not trivial. It exerts a powerful influence even when age-related vulnerabilities are already in place. Back in industrialized nations, the same patterns emerge on a smaller scale. Seniors who build habits of regular walking, maintain a healthy weight, and eat fewer refined sugars consistently show lower cancer risk than peers without those protections. Clinical research confirms that blood sugar regulation, inflammation levels, and body composition shape the odds strongly, even in advanced age. These differences do not mean immunity, nor do they guarantee safety. They mean probabilities shift considerably, and those shifts represent real power over health outcomes. Where this myth grows most harmful is in the attitude it cultivates. If seniors accept cancer as automatic, they lose incentive to act. Why spend effort refining diet if diagnosis feels unavoidable? Why exercise if fate already writes the ending? Why attend screenings if early detection is thought to merely postpone the inevitable? That resignation carries consequences. Poor habits left unchecked accelerate biological decline, giving cancer every advantage. Fatalism removes momentum exactly at the stage of life where momentum still matters most. Abandoning the myth puts motivation back where it belongs. Seniors who recognize that aging elevates risk but does not hand down certain outcomes can view every small health choice as meaningful. Every meal free of hidden sugars reduces the fuel tumors prefer. Every decision to walk instead of sit clears glucose and strengthens mitochondria. Every appointment kept for screening improves detection options. These actions do not erase age, but they reduce opportunity for cancer to exploit age. The difference is in recognizing influence where resignation once stood. Case studies and community research offer hopeful reinforcement. In populations with strong adherence to traditional dietary principles, it is not unusual to find older adults, well into their 80s or beyond, who never develop cancer diagnoses. Though such stories do not prove prevention, they strongly demonstrate possibility. That is enough to counter the myth. If large groups of elders remain cancer-free under certain conditions, then cancer cannot be equated with age itself. It is better viewed as the interaction of age with lived experience, where factors like metabolism, diet, and physical activity tilt the balance. By reframing cancer in this way, old age no longer appears as a guaranteed countdown, but as a stage defined by higher stakes. Those stakes require sharper choices, not surrender. Age undeniably raises risk curves, but curves are not certainties. Within the broad sweep of statistics, individual lives still diverge. Many lives illustrate exactly how choices steer outcomes away from the bleak assumptions society often makes. The most important message for seniors is that influence does not run out with time. Even changes made after decades of different habits still shift the underlying biology. Blood sugar falls quickly, inflammation decreases, and mitochondrial function rebounds within weeks to months of consistent adjustment. The body's capacity to respond gives agency back to those who fear they have none. What age takes away in resilience, deliberate living partially restores. So the myth of cancer as an inevitable feature of later years is best set aside. A more balanced truth better reflects both science and lived human experience. Age increases risk by shaping the conditions inside cells, but daily life determines whether that risk transforms into disease. Seniors who take practical steps, managing glucose, reducing processed foods, staying active, and respecting meal timing, reshape the bodily environment in ways less favorable to cancer. Traditional populations with historically low cancer burdens remind us lifestyle matters, but modern increases after diet shifts remind us that conditions change with choices. Inevitability is a false conclusion. Influence is the reality. This shift in perspective restores hope where it might feel absent. And once that hopeful foundation is in place, the most convincing evidence comes not from statistics, but from individual stories. Seniors who were told their time had run out have shown otherwise, sometimes with determination, sometimes with humor, and always with choices that changed the course of their health. Hope stories from seniors who fought back. There is no better way to understand the impact of these ideas than by looking at real lives shaped by them. What follows are selected case reports and personal accounts of seniors who tried metabolic approaches alongside their medical treatments. These are encouraging stories, but it is important to say from the start that they are not proof. They come from individual experiences, not large clinical trials, and they cannot predict outcomes for everyone. No one should rely on diet or fasting alone. Standard medical care remains essential, and any complementary strategy should only be attempted with medical supervision. One documented case that often draws attention is from a glioblastoma patient treated in the United States. Glioblastoma is an aggressive brain cancer, and expected survival is usually measured in months. Yet one man survived far longer than his original prognosis. His regimen included standard interventions, surgery, and radiation, but was also paired with a carefully monitored ketogenic-style diet designed to lower glucose and increase ketone use. His doctors noted stable scans and slower tumor progression than expected over time. Advocates point to this story as an example of how metabolic strategies may support patients when combined with conventional therapy. Still, clinicians emphasize it as atypical, not evidence that such outcomes can be expected generally. It demonstrates possibility, not certainty, beyond documented reports. Other seniors have shared personal experiences that point to lifestyle as a meaningful support. A man in his 70s found himself confronting serious illness. Alongside chemotherapy, he began a structured fasting pattern, limiting his meals to a shorter daily window. Within months, his blood sugar stabilized and insulin dropped. His doctors noted his scans showed slower growth than before. He described feeling steadier and more alert, even managing to continue light gardening that he thought treatment would prevent. When asked about his new meal routine, he laughed and remarked that he had simply given breakfast back to the clock. For him, the change felt natural rather than burdensome. Another senior facing breast cancer introduced modest adjustments, fewer refined carbohydrates, and longer overnight fasts. She had worried about fatigue, but reported the opposite: smoother energy during the day and sleep that improved for the first time in years. Small steps produced visible results: mild weight loss, better glucose numbers, and stability in her condition longer than doctors initially projected. She treated the situation with good humor, telling family gatherings she had shifted roles from bringing desserts to supplying salads. Her story, like others, reflects adaptation without austerity, changes that fit daily life rather than dominate it. These examples, whether from published reports or personal anecdotes, carry a consistent message. The seniors involved did not rely on perfect discipline or extreme regimens. They applied ordinary habits in more deliberate ways, delaying breakfast, skipping sugary snacks, replacing bread with vegetables, or choosing a light walk after meals. They held to medical treatments while exploring strategies that gave them greater control over how they lived day to day. The success they described often went beyond measurable results. It was about quality, having the strength to join family events, continue hobbies, and add a sense of purpose in routines that had once felt like restrictions. The ripple effects of these efforts spread wider than the individuals themselves. Family members, inspired by their parents or grandparents, sometimes copied the same small practices. A 75-year-old's intermittent fasting routine inspired his granddaughter to attempt it while studying at university. He tracked improvements in his glucose, she noticed better focus in class, and their shared experience opened new topics of conversation across generations. Such stories show how seniors can influence others not by rules or lectures, but by practicing consistent habits in visible ways. While critics are right to point out that these stories are anecdotal, their value lies in showing what is feasible. They prove that even later in life, people can experiment with safe, supervised methods and adapt them successfully. They show that older adults are not locked out of improvement simply because decades have already passed. They also highlight that visible benefits, such as steadier energy, lighter digestion, and more restful sleep, often appear within weeks, making them relevant even for those unsure if they have years ahead to reap results. What these accounts confirm is not definitive cure, but the possibility of agency. They reveal that with guidance, seniors can still make changes that alter how their bodies function and how they experience daily life. The improvements may be modest in medical terms, but large in personal ones. Fewer days of fatigue, greater presence at family gatherings, more confidence in facing treatments. Those results matter. And they reinforce the point that age does not erase the influence of choices still available. The question then becomes practical. Stories inspire, but they naturally lead to the next concern among seniors: the need for clear direction. Once someone hears that fasting windows, lower sugar intake, and light exercise may help, the immediate thought is straightforward. What should I actually do each day? How do these ideas translate into a morning routine, a plate of food, or a 20-minute walk after dinner? That is the step where hope moves into action, and where the details begin to matter. Practical daily blueprint for seniors. For seniors who want more than encouragement, what helps most is a clear, steady plan they can follow without guesswork. A practical daily blueprint shows how to apply timing, diet, and movement in ways that feel realistic and safe. The purpose here is not to create a rigid set of rules, but to offer a guide you can adapt to your own rhythm with medical supervision, especially if you use medications that affect glucose, blood pressure, or the heart. Even small changes applied consistently can shift the body's internal environment in ways that leave cancer fewer opportunities to grow. Start by reconsidering the morning routine. Many seniors grew up on the message that breakfast must happen immediately after waking. In fact, a simple timing strategy can work in your favor. If you finish dinner around 6 or 7 in the evening and wait until 9 or 10 the next morning for your first meal, you create a 12 to 16 hour overnight fast. This is not about skipping meals to prove toughness or chasing trends. It is about reducing the hours each day when blood sugar stays elevated. During those fasting hours, the body taps into stored energy and produces ketones, which healthy cells can use effectively, but which cancer cells cannot. Before trying this, especially if you have diabetes or take insulin or blood pressure medications, it is essential to talk with your doctor. Medication doses often require adjustment when meal timing shifts. When you do break your fast, keep the meal balanced and low in hidden sugars. Bread, cereal, or fruit juice create sharp glucose surges the body must manage. Safer choices build from protein and healthy fats: a vegetable omelet, plain Greek yogurt with nuts, or eggs with leafy greens. These options satisfy hunger, stabilize blood sugar, and reduce the fuel stream tumors depend on. Lunchtime brings the same principle. Rather than relying on sandwiches with refined bread, lean on soups loaded with beans and vegetables, lettuce wraps, or colorful salads dressed in olive oil. You still feel full, but you remove the hidden sugars that otherwise shape your inner environment toward disease. Dinner fits best when kept simple and earlier in the evening. Many seniors already prefer lighter suppers, which naturally extends overnight fasting. Anchoring the meal with protein, such as fish, poultry, or lean meat, paired with non-starchy vegetables like cauliflower, broccoli, zucchini, or peppers, brings nutrient density without heavy glucose load. Starches such as rice, pasta, or potatoes are not off-limits, but they should remain side items rather than the main part of the plate. Finishing food by 6 or 7 allows digestion to wind down before sleep, widening the early portion of the fast without effort. Hydration supports both fasting and meal timing. Seniors sometimes confuse thirst with hunger, leading to unnecessary snacking. Keeping water nearby reduces these cravings. Unsweetened tea or black coffee can also be used during fasting hours, but avoid adding sugar or artificial sweeteners, which may still prompt metabolic responses. Think of water and plain drinks not as a bland substitute, but as tools that make fasting windows easier to maintain comfortably. Activity layers naturally onto these steps. You do not need heavy weights or rigorous gym sessions to see benefits. One of the most powerful proven habits is to take a 10 to 20-minute walk after meals. This simple practice pulls glucose from the bloodstream into the muscles, which lowers blood sugar levels and forces cancer cells to face a leaner fuel supply. 4. Functional strength. Add 2 short sessions of resistance work each week. Resistance bands, light dumbbells, or even body weight moves like repeated chair stands activate large muscle groups. Stronger muscles soak up glucose more effectively, acting like larger sponges that help drain fuel from the bloodstream. Gardening, sweeping, or light dancing can also fit seamlessly into daily life, making movement both practical and enjoyable. The mid-afternoon remains challenging for many seniors when fatigue and cravings are strongest. Processed snacks, crackers, cookies, or bars feel convenient but undo earlier progress. Preparing small plates of cut vegetables, cheese cubes, or nuts ahead of time changes the decision point. When the craving comes, the safer option is already available. This small shift often saves more daily sugar than the occasional decision to refuse dessert. Consistency here matters more than perfection. Medical oversight is a central part of this blueprint. Seniors with diabetes, especially those taking insulin or sulfonylureas, must avoid sudden fasting without supervision. These drugs lower blood glucose, and combining them with longer fasts can cause dangerous hypoglycemia. The same applies to antihypertensive or heart medications, since lower body weight or shifted fluid balance can change how drugs act. Doctors can advise whether to alter dosages and how to monitor blood sugar and blood pressure safely. Ideally, schedule a medication review within a week or 2 of starting even modest fasting or dietary changes. This makes sure improvements in metabolism are paired with safe adjustments in prescriptions. To make these ideas practical, here is a clear checklist you can carry into tomorrow morning. First, on waking, hydrate with water, tea, or black coffee instead of eating straight away. Second, delay breakfast by 1 to 3 hours beyond your usual time, creating a gentle fasting window. Third, when you do eat, make the first meal protein-based and paired with vegetables or healthy fats, avoiding high-sugar foods. Fourth, walk for 10 to 20 minutes after 1 or more meals, using the activity to burn glucose in real time. Fifth, swap sugary snacks for small portions of nuts, cheese, or cut vegetables during the afternoon. Sixth, call your doctor's office to schedule a medication review within the next 1 to 2 weeks, particularly if you manage diabetes or heart conditions. These tangible steps transform broad concepts into an actionable daily routine. Notice what this plan does not require. It does not demand exotic supplements, difficult recipes, or long gym sessions. Most seniors already lean towards smaller dinners, lighter appetites, and earlier bedtimes. This blueprint takes those natural tendencies and strengthens them with timing and food choices. By making patterns deliberate rather than accidental, you create an environment less favorable for cancer to exploit. Each adjustment directly supports metabolism, but together they form a steady framework that reshapes the body's internal chemistry safely. Applied steadily, these changes begin to show results quickly. Within weeks, many seniors notice lower fasting glucose, better blood pressure numbers, more stable energy, and lighter digestion. None of these are miracle outcomes, but they are evidence the body still adapts at any age. Even partial progress in reducing daily sugar exposure or adding short walks leaves malignant cells fewer options for growth. Over months, the routine becomes second nature, less about therapy and more about a lifestyle that favors resilience. This blueprint stands as proof that influence over cancer risk does not disappear with age. Seniors remain capable of shaping metabolism through steady, ordinary choices. With clinician guidance, meal timing, hydration, safe activity, and reduced hidden sugars become available tools in reshaping health. What began as scientific observations about glucose and metabolism turns into lived practice through the decisions that fill a single day. And behind those decisions rests a larger truth worth carrying forward. Whether cells are supplied with fuel or left without it depends on what seniors choose moment by moment. Cancer is not simply a fate sealed by age. It is shaped every day by habits, choices about food, activity, and the rhythm of meals. For seniors, that influence is close at hand, and progress comes through steady routines rather than extreme measures. Beginning with small adjustments, a later breakfast, a short walk after dinner, or swapping bread for vegetables, can steadily shift the body's inner environment in healthier directions. If you're curious, raise this with your doctor at your next visit and ask about trying a supervised plan or simple meal timing approach. And if you'd like a practical checklist, comment below and we'll pin a short script to guide you. One final reminder: lifestyle change is powerful, but it should never replace regular medical care. Keep up with screenings, mammograms, colonoscopy, prostate checks, because early detection remains an essential safeguard alongside prevention.